Welcome to the first of 4 days of the Merritt Sewalong, where I'm going to take you step by step in how to sew up this pattern. Now you can find links to this pattern as well as lots of other things like tools and the fabric that I used, all in the comment section below. In order to show all of the steps, I will be sewing up 2 versions of this pattern, one in this kind of green linen and one in this purple linen, so don't be shocked when I'm jumping back and forth between the two. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to transfer all of our markings from our pattern pieces to our fabric. Now, first of all, on all of these notches, I always just do a teeny little clip. Just make sure that it is a small clip since the seam allowance is 1/2 inch. You want to make sure that those little clips and those notches are around 1/4 inch so they don't impede on your stitching. And then next you should have a few dot markings. Now what I like to actually do is cut out those dots. So I just take the little hole punch that comes with the buttonhole opener set that I have, and then I just go ahead and do a little punch at each of these dot markings. So there's dot markings for the pocket placement on the front, and then there's also some dot markings on the collar stand. Now for the front, you are going to just put those markings on the right side of your left front. So that's why I've gone ahead and flipped over this pattern piece, and then I just take a little marker. I like these ultra washable Crayola markers because they're nice and pointy and precise, and I go ahead and mark it. So that was the pocket markings, and then on both of your collar stands, go ahead and also do your dot markings on the right side of your fabric. Next up, let's go ahead and mark the fold line that is going to become your front placket. Now this marking is going to be on the wrong side of your fabric on both of the fronts, and what I do is I just measure it. So it's actually 1 1/4 inches in from the raw edge, and then I just go ahead and mark that along the center front edge there. Like I said, 1 1/4 inch in on the wrong side of the fabric, and go ahead and do that on both of your front pieces. Now, if you are sewing up one of the long sleeve views, you're also going to want to mark your sleeve plackets. Now, I find that the easiest way to do this is I actually cut along that middle line and those little V's, and then I fold back the flaps on the sleeve placket pattern piece here, and that gives you just like a nice little edge then to line up and mark on both of your sleeve plackets. Now this outside rectangle that you're marking here is going to be your stitch line. And once you have marked that, you can easily just fold in one of the flaps, and that helps you to mark the cut line, which is that middle line, and that little V shape at the top. So go ahead and do that for both of your placket pieces, and then you're going to actually do the exact same thing on your actual sleeves. Now, both on the plackets and the sleeves, this should be marked on the wrong side of the fabric. Now the last thing that we want to mark is all of our pleats. So there's pleats on the sleeves if you're doing the long sleeves, and then there's also pleats on the back. So I like to just take one of my marking tools. I like to go ahead and mark it on the right side of the fabric, and then I also like to go ahead and draw in the little arrows so that I know which way that I am folding the fabric. So I'm going to do that again right here. So this is on the top edge of the back, and I am marking the little pleat that goes just below the yoke, and I like to draw in that little arrow. Okay, so everything is now marked, and now we are going to add our interfacing. So first we're going to add interfacing to the wrong side of the collar stand, and the collar. So you're just doing it to one of each of these, and these ones will then become your main collar stand and your main collar. So if you're trying to choose between the two collar pieces that you cut out or the collar stands, just pick the one that you want to be more visible, to be this one that has the interfacing on it. And then we're also going to add the button front placket interfacing, which is a 1-inch strip of interfacing. You're going to place that 1/4 of an inch in from the raw edge, and that is going to be on the wrong side of the fabric. And make sure that you are doing it to both the left and the right side. Now, the last thing that you're going to want to interface is if you are sewing up any of the long sleeve views of the Merritt, then you're also going to want to interface one pair of your cuffs. And just like the collar and the collar stand, whichever cuffs that you decide to apply interfacing will become your main cuffs. Okay, now that everything is interfaced and marked, we can go ahead and start actually sewing up our Merritt. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we are gonna fold in 1/4 of an inch along that front center edge. So you're actually just folding right along the edge of the interfacing, so that fold will be going in wrong sides touching. And then once you folded in the 1/4 of an inch edge, then you're going to fold it in again, wrong sides touching, along the fold line, which is 1 inch in along the other edge of the interfacing. Once that's pressed really well, go ahead and pin that. Now, once you've done that to one side, you're going to do the exact same thing to your other front. Now that those are prepped, we are going to sew our button front placket by going over to our sewing machine and sewing along that inside folded edge. Now, I like to sew as close to kind of that folded edge as I can, so a true edge stitch, and I go ahead and do this from the wrong side of the fabric. I know that a lot of people do prefer to do it on the right side of the fabric just because you sometimes, depending on your machine, get a better stitch, so that is completely up to you. Now, of course, whatever you do to one side, go ahead and do the exact same thing to your other front. Now that those are prepped, we do want to do a little bit of stay stitching so that we don't stretch out our neckline. So on both of the fronts and also both of your yoke pieces, you are going to stay stitch along that edge. We're going to do that at 3/8 of an inch instead of a 1/2 an inch, just so that that resides just a little bit inside of our stitch line so we don't have to unpick it later. I know you might be tempted to skip this step, but I really wouldn't when we are doing the burrito method later, which is how we go ahead and finish out our yokes. There's quite a bit of tension that goes on the neckline, and you want to make sure that this does not get stretched out in those steps. Okay, now that the fronts and the yokes are all stay stitched, now we can move on to the pocket. So take your front pocket and you're going to press down the top edge of this chest pocket by 1/4 of an inch so that wrong sides are touching. Now I just kind of guesstimate this, but if you want to measure it, go ahead and do that. Now flip the pocket over and pull the top edge back with right sides touching, and do this by an additional 1 inch or at those notches, and go ahead and pin them at the sides. And then stitch around those side and the bottom edges of the chest pocket at a normal 1/2 inch seam allowance, pivoting at those bottom corners and back stitching at those top edges. Okay, this is what it should look like now with those all stitched. Now at the top corners, we're gonna go ahead and reduce bulk by trimming down those corners, and then you're gonna turn those top corners right side out. And then you're gonna continue to fold in the edges and the bottom by 1/2 inch on those stitch lines that you previously made. And then of course also press down that top folded edge so that it is nice and even. Now, if you followed me for a while, you know that I'm a real big fan of a glue stick in sewing. And this is one of those times where I really like to just add a little bit of the glue stick to kind of press in those corners so they don't accidentally poke out on the right side of your pocket once you've stitched it down. Next, we're going to stitch just inside of that upper folded edge to secure that folded edge on the top of the pocket. Now, I do this from the underside, but once again, depending on your machine, you might choose to do that with the right side facing up when you're stitching. Okay, now you're going to want to grab your left front. Now that's the left front when you're wearing. And then you are going to place your pocket so that those top corners line up with the pocket markings on your left front. Now, like I said before, I like to use a glue stick when I'm attaching these pockets, but you can of course just pin them if that is what you're more comfortable with. I should just say real quick that if you do use a glue stick, make sure that you let it completely dry before you run it through your machine so it doesn't gum up your machine at all. Okay, so really carefully just make sure that everything is lined up and even, and then we are going to stitch around the edges, and with that we do a little rectangle at each of those top edges for reinforcement. This is just kind of a little design detail as well, so you can go ahead and do that if you want, or just finish off the top of the pocket however you prefer. And when you are stitching the sides and the bottom of the pocket, you really are doing a true edge stitch. You want to get as close to the edge and the corners as you can as you're stitching. That will help that pocket to lay really nicely and flat, especially after you wash it a couple times. And here I am once again doing that little rectangle at the top. I usually stitch across about 3 stitches, then stitch down, pivot, rotate, go ahead and stitch in about 3 stitches again. And this is what it should look like when it is done. And that is it for today. We'll return tomorrow where we will continue stitching up the back and the collar.